My guest says even with the economy in dire straits and high food and fuel prices, it's not impossible for families to save and even give this year. Well, that's coming from a mother of 7 children, with 3 in college, still 2 at home. America's family financial expert. Maybe a familiar face if you watch Fox News or CNN. Ellie Kay is a timely delivery all the way from California. Welcome.
Thanks. Great to be with you today.
You just picked the right theme for life before you knew
Yes.
how important it would be.
Yes, you know, I think God had a plan, and I was actually a born saver because I was due at the end of January, but I was born December 28th, just in time to give my dad another income tax deduction. So,
Are you from a big family, Ellie?
yes, well, I have 3 children. There are 3 children in my family, so it's not inordinately large. But I did know from a very young age that the Lord was going to call me into the whole area of finances and the ability to save money and even give away money.
I like that last point. I like that last point. Now here's The Economist, the world in 2009, and in this issue, they actually apologize. They missed it. They didn't see what was coming.
Right.
In a world where the banks and big business and nobody seemed to predict what was on the horizon, how can we be confident that we can put our ship right?
Well, you know, they didn't predict what was going to happen, and as we see things change dramatically in just 1 year. People went from saving money this time last year on buying coffee at home and, you know, not going out to restaurants as much, and now those same people, last year that's how they were saving, those same people this year, now they're downsizing their homes, they're selling cars, they're sending their kids to public colleges instead of private schools. So there has been a radical change, and it wasn't predicted, and we don't know what the future holds, but we do know who holds the future. So I think it's a very important time right now for people to get their finances in biblical order. And when you do that, then you can handle what's going to be around the next corner.
10% of Americans facing foreclosure. Well, it's nightly news, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Bankruptcies, layoffs, and it's a crisis. And this is hope.
Yes, it is.
And it's well earned. You've not just come up with some great theories, you've been there, done that.
Absolutely. You know, in my background, I was a business major in college, and then when I got out of college, I became a broker, and I really loved business. I loved being a broker. And then I met the world's greatest fighter pilot, and he said that we could join the military and see the world. And what he showed me was 5 babies in the first 7 years of marriage, and we moved 11 times in 13 years. So
Now, he had 2 children.
Yes, and he had 2 children,
And
so that's a
together you
total
had
of 7.
5.
Yes, so we had 5, he had 2, that's 7 children. But the other thing that I inherited was $40,000 worth of consumer debt. And so we have been there in terms of having debt. And we had to actually, some months, we didn't even have enough money to buy groceries.
Really?
We didn't, but you know, there was a wonderful verse that gave us hope, and it's a verse I want to share today because it will give people that are watching us today hope. And that is the whole idea that once I was young and now I am old, but I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. So the Lord took care of us when we had all of that debt and we're trying to make ends meet, but he went beyond that, because when we gave our finances to Him, we put them in biblical order, the way that they needed to be, then in 2.5 years we were completely debt-free off of one income, off of his humble military salary, because it really can be done.
We need to come back to what that biblical order is, but you know, the first thing that comes to mind as you tell me this is just the stress, the potential to really cause strife within the marriage when you've got this kind of financial pressure.
Right.
Did you have that?
Well, we were newlyweds, and everything was wonderful. And so,
who cares about poverty?
Right,
we have each
well,
other.
but we looked at it. Maybe it was because of that, but we chose to look at it as an adventure. And we decided that, you know, this will be a challenge. This will be something that we can rise to. This is something that we can overcome. And so we kind of had a different paradigm on it. We looked at it differently, and that helped with the stress between the two of us. Now, obviously there was stress because my husband is a born spender, I'm a born saver. And so there's some natural friction. I mean, we didn't like to call it arguments. We'd like to call it intense fellowship. And we had a lot of intense fellowship.
And you had God at the center. You knew He had you for each other, and He was good for all His promises as you worked this through.
You know, absolutely. That is what made all the difference in the world, is that we invited God into the equation. We didn't say, okay, our finances are really messed up, we're going to handle this ourselves, because our finances were really messed up. And that's what handling ourselves did for us, was it got that into that kind of a position. So then we decided, hey, if, you know, God, our Creator, owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, then surely He can sell a cow. I mean, He can help us. He can come into our financial picture, give us wisdom, and we had diligence and we chose obedience. And in all of those things, we found financial freedom. And that's what I'm doing today, is helping others find financial freedom on limited resources.
Now, I don't know where the starting place is, but I loved your 3 numbers, and I wondered if that was maybe a foundation for getting things in a biblical order, as you say.
Yes, yes, and those
10,
yes,
10, and 80.
Right, the 10-10-80 plan. And it's really pretty straightforward and pretty simple. The first 10% is given away. And I think that's what I call the sweetest dollar that you ever make. It's the one that you can give away to help other people. The second 10% is saved. And I like to say that the safest dollar that you ever spend is the one that you can put away. And then the last 80% is spent wisely, and that's the key. The smartest dollar that you ever spend is the one that you can spend wisely.
Now, you're talking about tithing.
Right.
And for some people, that's a new concept.
Right.
It's giving the first 10%
Right.
to God,
Right.
or others.
Right.
And you know, I had an elderly friend who she gave 20%. She lived alone. She was a widow for many, many years. And it was a real life lesson to see how God took care of her. But she gave very generously. And she said, you know, I had a man come in here and he said, I can't afford to tithe. If I tithe, I won't have bread to put on the table. And she smiled and she said, no, you'll have strawberry shortcake. And that is the reality,
great.
that when you
Yes.
obey God's principles,
Yes.
they work.
They really do. And when my husband and I were first married, we had so much consumer debt that we were actually living and functioning on a poverty level when it came to the amount of money that we had to pay down debt, to buy food, to pay rent, you know, to do all of those things. And some well-meaning Christians even said, hey, you know, Bob and Ellie, God will understand. You don't really have to pay a tithe right now because you're not at a point where you can afford to tithe. But we knew God's principles, and we responded and said, you know what, we can't afford not to tithe. Because see, what happens, according to Malachi 3:10, that's God's tithe. We're supposed to bring our whole tithe into the storehouse.
It's his anyhow.
Yes, it is. And if we don't, then we're going to find the ramifications. So when we tithe, we invite God into the equation. When we refuse to tithe, when we hold it with tight, closed fists, then we push God out. And I tell you, in today's economy, you want God in your finances. If there was ever a time that you want God to be in your life, it is now. And you want to invite Him into your finances. The way that you do that is through the biblical tithe.
Give, and it shall be given to you. So regardless of where you are financially, that's the starting place? Is that the starting place?
Yes, it really is. And, you know, I tell people to do what they can and to start where they are. So right now, maybe they're not tithing anything. Maybe they're tithing 1% or less even than that. I read some Barna research recently, and you'd be surprised at as many as 30% of Americans don't even give $1 every year. So there are a lot of people not hardly giving anything at all. So you can start where you are, and you can start by giving 3, 4, 5%, and then eventually get to the 10% that you're giving out. And you're going to see that when you do that, God meets you where you are. He provides things for you. I mean, God provided so many things for our family, so much so that in one income, a military man's income, in the first 15 years of our life, and I wasn't working outside the home, at that time. So in that first 15 years, our family was able to buy 11 cars and pay cash for them. We gave away 3 of them.
In how many years?
This is in the first 15 years.
bought
We bought
11
11
cars.
different cars, and they were used cars. You know,
Okay.
we'd buy some and sell them and so forth. But we paid cash for those, gave away 3 of them. We bought a beautiful 5-bedroom home, and then we bought a second one after we sold the first. We went on vacations on a regular basis. Our kids were dressed in style. We had the living rich kind of lifestyle, and that was just off of one income. But here's the kicker. In that first 15 years, in our regular tithe, we gave away over $100,000.
That is really something.